Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something that I think a lot of you out there listening have probably faced at some point, the fear of speaking English.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's a huge hurdle.
It is, but it's something that we can absolutely work through. So to kick things off today, we have an expert in helping people find their voice in English.
Hi, glad to be here.
So to get us started, why is this fear of speaking English such a common thing?
Well, I think people get really hung up on these three main fears. The fear of messing up, making mistakes with grammar, pronunciation, or just sounding kind of silly.
I can see that.
And then there's this fear of judgment, like, what will people think of me? Do I have a weird accent? Will they think I'm not very smart?
Yeah, you just kind of freeze up.
Right. And then on top of those two, there's often just this overall lack of confidence, like, I'm just not ready to speak English yet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because one of the articles you sent over talked about this guy named Raj, and he was so scared to order food at a restaurant in English.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. What happened?
Well, he was convinced that everyone was going to laugh at him, but he finally pushed through the fear, ordered his food, and you know what? Nobody even cared. It went totally fine.
See, that's the thing. We tend to think people are judging us way more than they actually are. They're usually too busy thinking about their own stuff.
That's so true. So it's not about being perfect then. It's more about just communicating.
Exactly. And that's why I'm such a big believer in speaking from day one. Even if it's just simple phrases, the more you speak, the more confident you become.
That makes sense. But what about those times when you completely blank on a word? Like you're in a conversation and suddenly your mind goes blank.
Oh, I have the perfect technique for that. It's called the sandwich technique.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So let's say you forget the word stapler, right? Instead of just freezing up, you describe the word you're looking for. So you could say, I need that thing, for attaching papers, the one with the metal part.
So instead of getting stuck, you just keep the conversation going.
Exactly. And it actually helps your brain remember the word, too. By describing it, you're thinking about its characteristics, and that can often jog your memory.
That's so smart. I love that. Now, another thing that really stood out in the research was this idea of thinking in English. What does that even mean? How do you do that?
Well, when you're constantly translating back and forth between your native language and English, it slows you down. Thinking in English is about breaking free from that translation habit.
So you're training your brain to think directly in English.
Exactly.
But how do you actually make that shift?
One really simple but effective method is just talking to yourself in English.
Wait, really? Like just narrate your day in English?
Yeah, describe what you're doing, what you're thinking about. You can even have little imaginary conversations.
I guess that makes sense. It's like built-in practice anytime, anywhere.
Exactly.
Now, I know some people might be thinking, well, that's great, but I don't have anyone to practice with. What do you tell those people?
There are actually a ton of options these days. You can try language learning apps. AI chatbots are getting really good at conversations, too.
True technology has really opened up new possibilities for language learning. But what about those who still feel shy about speaking out loud? Even if they have someone to practice with.
Start small. Practice in front of a mirror. Record yourself or even talk to your pet. The key is to get comfortable hearing your own voice speaking English.
So it's about building up that confidence gradually.
Exactly. And we've got a lot of great questions from our listeners who are dealing with specific speaking anxieties. Would you be up for tackling a few of them?
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, bring it on.
All right, so first up, what if people laugh at me when I make mistakes?
Most people are actually really encouraging and supportive.
Yeah.
And if someone does laugh, just try to laugh along. It shows you're confident and willing to learn.
Okay, good advice. Next one. What if I forget a word in the middle of a sentence?
Remember that sandwich technique we talked about? Describe the word you're looking for. It'll help you get your point across, and often you'll end up remembering the word anyway.
Nice. Okay, here's a common one. How long until I'm fluent?
It depends on your starting point, how much you practice your learning style. There's no magic formula. The key is to be consistent and celebrate every step you take.
That's reassuring. It takes the pressure off needing to reach some imaginary finish line. All right, last question. What if I don't have a speaking partner?
We already talked about some great options. Talk to yourself. Use language learning apps. Chat with a chatbot. There's so many ways to practice these days.
Technology really is amazing.
It is. And I think it's really encouraging for English learners. You have so many tools and resources available to help you.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground so far, but before we move on, I want to hear any final words of encouragement you have for those who are still feeling hesitant about speaking English.
Here's a challenge I give to people just starting out. Record a 30-second video of yourself speaking English about your day. Doesn't have to be perfect or anything, just get those words out. You'll be surprised how much it helps your confidence.
That's a great challenge, and it really emphasizes the idea that small steps can lead to big results. So remember, everyone, this deep dive is all about empowering you to find your voice and speak English confidently. And don't worry, we're not done yet. We'll be right back to delve even deeper into this topic. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our deep dive into conquering the fear of speaking English. You know, one thing that came up earlier was this idea that people feel like they need to be fluent before they even start speaking.
Right, like you have to wait until you're perfect.
Exactly. Which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
It is. It's like thinking you need to be a professional chef before you can even make scrambled eggs.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So how do you measure progress, though? When does someone actually become fluent?
Honestly, fluency isn't really an end goal. It's more of an ongoing process. It's about being able to communicate your thoughts and ideas clearly, even if it's not perfect.
And the more you speak, the better you get, right?
Exactly. You're building up those neural pathways in your brain, making it easier and easier to speak.
So it's all about consistent practice. One of the things that really stood out in the research was this emphasis on surrounding yourself with English as much as possible, like watching movies, listening to music, even changing your phone settings.
Yeah, immersion is huge.
Yeah.
It's like constantly bathing your brain in the language.
And it's so much more fun than just studying grammar rules.
Absolutely. You're learning naturally without even realizing it.
So it's not just about passively consuming content, though, right? It's about actively engaging with it.
Exactly. Like when you're watching a movie, try to pick out a few new words or phrases and then use them in your own conversations later.
That's a great tip. It's about making those connections between what you're hearing and actually using it. Speaking of using English, let's go back to that idea of talking to yourself.
Ah, yes. The private conversation partner who's always available.
It sounds a bit strange, but it can be really helpful.
It is. Talk through your day practice, what you're going to say in an upcoming conversation. You can even have imaginary debates in English.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that I used to do something similar when I was learning to play the piano.
Oh, really? What did you do?
I would talk myself through difficult passages. It helped me break them down and really understand the movements.
I love that. It's the same principle. Repetition and practice are key, whether it's music or language.
But what about those people who feel self-conscious about their own voice? You know, they're worried about their accent or pronunciation.
Recording yourself can be a great way to work on those things. You can listen back and pinpoint specific areas you want to improve.
So it's like having your own personal stagecoach.
Exactly. And you can try different techniques too, like shadowing. Have you ever heard of that?
Tell me more.
You listen to a recording of a native speaker and try to imitate their pronunciation and intonation as closely as possible.
Ah, so you're mimicking the way they speak.
Exactly. It's great for developing a more natural flow and rhythm.
Okay, so we've talked about the technical aspects like pronunciation, but what about the mental game? How important is mindset in overcoming this fear?
Mindset is everything. If you approach speaking English with a positive attitude, you're way more likely to succeed. Remember, mistakes are a natural part of learning.
It's about seeing those mistakes as opportunities to grow.
Exactly. But I know it can be tough to stay positive when you hit those inevitable plateaus. What do you do when you feel stuck?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sometimes it helps to shift your focus away from fluency and more towards just communicating. Remember, the goal is to connect with others and share your ideas.
So it's more about authenticity than perfection.
Yes. Find your own unique voice and express yourself confidently.
We've talked about practice immersion mindset. Are there any other secrets to success when it comes to speaking English?
One thing that's often overlooked is the importance of finding your tribe. Find people who support your goals and encourage you along the way.
So like a language exchange partner or a conversation group?
Exactly. It's about creating a safe and supportive environment where you can practice and grow without feeling judged.
You know, it's interesting. We've been talking a lot about the mental aspects of speaking, but there's also this physical element to it, right? Like body language and confidence.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
The way we carry ourselves physically can have a big impact on how we feel and how others perceive us.
So if you're feeling nervous, standing up straight, making eye contact, taking deep breaths can actually help boost your confidence.
It can. It's about projecting an image of confidence, even if you don't feel it completely on the inside yet.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. And the more you practice those confident behaviors, the more natural and genuine they'll become.
We've covered so much ground today, and I feel like we've given our listeners a ton of great strategies. But before we wrap up this part of the episode, do you have any final words of wisdom for those who are still struggling with their fear of speaking?
I would just say be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never give up on your dream of speaking English fluently. And remember, you're not alone on this journey.
That's so important to remember. And everyone, there's so many resources and communities out there to support you. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. We'll be right back to wrap up our deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts and takeaways.
Okay.
All right, we are back for the final part of our deep dive into overcoming the fear of speaking English. We've talked about a lot of strategies and mindset shifts, but now I want to talk about actually using English in real life.
Yeah, I mean, practicing with an app or talking to yourself is great, but having real conversations can feel a lot different.
So where do you even begin if you're feeling intimidated by those real-world interactions?
Well, I think the key is to start small. Look for those everyday opportunities to have brief conversations, like ordering coffee, asking for directions, things like that.
Yeah, those low-pressure situations.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. Native speakers don't expect you to be perfect.
That's a good point. It takes the pressure off. Some of the research also mentioned things like language exchange partners or conversation groups. What are your thoughts on those?
I think they can be super helpful,
Mm.
especially for practicing your speaking skills. You get to connect with other people who are learning English or even native speakers.
It's all about creating that community and support system.
Exactly. You're not alone in this journey. One thing I think is really important is finding your own voice in English.
What do you mean by that?
It's about embracing your individuality and expressing yourself authentically. It's not about trying to sound exactly like a native speaker.
So it's not about perfection, it's about being yourself.
Exactly. And people connect with that more anyway, when you're genuine and passionate.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, is there any final message you want to leave our listeners with?
Remember that learning to speak English is a journey. It's going to take time and effort, but it's so worth it. Be kind to yourself, celebrate your progress, and never give up.
Beautifully said. And everyone remember, the power to speak English confidently is within you. It starts with taking that first step and embracing the challenges. We hope this deep dive has given you the tools and inspiration to find your voice and speak your truth in English. So keep practicing, keep learning, and never stop exploring the possibilities.
And remember, you're not alone in this. There's a whole community out there supporting you.
That's right. So go out there, find your voice, and speak your heart out. We believe in you.
Would you?
That's all for today's deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep speaking your heart out in English.